Warning, the following video has flashing lights and also includes content that may be deemed inappropriate for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. A member of the Midnight Society science team has decided once again to awaken me from my slumber, as she has decided we must battle these monstrous creatures of the night. I do appreciate the offering. That was absolutely delicious. And I do believe, without further ado, we do have things to attend to, you and I.
Stood up. I said, oh my god, it's a werewolf. And everybody in the car freaked out.
My creatures of the night. Yes, once again, you're tuning in to Midnight Lycanthropy here on StarFox Radio. Colleen, one of the members and scientists for the Midnight Society, has again decided to set up the late night fire for us as we burn the timber into the early hours of the morning, wondering why there's a mysterious rainforest in Idaho, and also, wait a second, nuclear potential evolving wolves in Chernobyl. That's some pretty gnarly stuff. Colleen, what the heck you been up to?
Hey, my friend, I tell you what, I'm glad we're in Idaho for the part of this topic tonight. But gosh, so busy with different shows that we're doing, and like you, editing constantly, making content, working a full-time job. It's just bonkers. I don't know how are we going to get through this? We're so busy.
Beautiful stuff right there, and you just got to squat up with myself and others. We'll get you churning. It's a great way for you to, as you stated, once you cruise into retirement, you got some sort of aspect that keeps you rolling, keeps you youthful, keeps an income coming for you, keeps your interest and goals aligned. This is all great stuff. And would you like to tell the audience this podcast that is going to be new you're diving into, because we're going to want to have you send me the links so that in the video description I can add it beside Nightmare Road.
Awesome. Thank you. I sure will. We just started a new show called The Thin Line, and so I really appreciate the shout out. It took off on us overnight. So it's a show on first responders and trauma response and everything that they deal with, and funny stuff, sad stuff, terrifying stuff, but it's first responders, military, everybody, the whole gamut involved with that. Yep.
Excellent stuff right there. And as I stated, yes, make sure to toss me the links, and from here on out and every time we collaborate, I'll make sure to have that up in the description. Yes, to the audience, Colleen was in the military herself. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure I read your bio. You used to work on the decks of a Navy ship directing military aircrafts.
Air traffic controller, yes. Yes, I was. In the Navy. So, yep, I enjoyed my time in the Navy, and I do kind of miss it, actually. Yep.
Great stuff right there. And big kudos as well. Anyone out there that's listening that has an interest in anything Colleen just stated, go over there and check it out because she has a lot of good things churning out. As soon as I saw the rainforest, of course, Idaho. Who am I going to think of first? Yeah, you and Dirty Birdie. I mean, it just legit makes sense. I actually didn't send him that. I sent it to you first because I was like, wow, super cool, bizarre. A lot of people don't fully understand the term rainforest, meaning the Pacific Northwest and such has rainforest. Wait, what? Rainforests are supposed to be in the Amazon and things. Well, yes, that's one version of the rainforest.
Right.
Completely bizarre. It just shows you it has to now add another element of what could pass through there or what could survive. I mean, it's almost as if seemingly an oasis in the middle of a desert, correct?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Idaho has such a huge, like an enormous variety of weather patterns here. Where I live, it's considered high desert, but we have a lot of conifer here and a huge amount of farmland, but it's considered high desert, high altitude desert. It's very dry, even though we have conifers. We have conifers like on the eastern slope of the mountains because the snowfall is going to stay there the longest. But we're also the coldest part of the state down here. Where you go up to where this rainforest is, it's the very northern part of the state where it's actually seems counterintuitive, warmer, much warmer than it is here. So it's interesting, but yeah, I mean, think of the Olympic National Rainforest in Washington. And so you go east, you would think it would get dry out, but then there's this considered banana belt of Idaho up in the Panhandle region, and they get a tremendous amount of up to somewhere in the amount of between I think 40 and 50 inches of rain a year. A lot of rain.
Ooh, that's
Yeah.
definitely some growth material right there, eh?
Haha, yeah. And what's interesting about this rainforest, and you had sent me that link, and I thought, how bizarre is this? You're reading my mind because just the day before, I had actually watched 3 or 4 documentaries on the Idaho rainforest. So great habitat, great cover. It's an incredible area. It's not huge. Like I said, it's up in the Panhandle, but it has um, there's a large percentage of this rainforest actually at one time had caribou in it, which I don't think there's any caribou now in the rainforest. They've since vanished, and some of them were moved up to Canada, where there was more of a contiguous forest for them. I think ours got a little bit too fragmented for them to keep going. So they moved them up to Canada. But some of the tree species we also have, like I think there was some, if I'm not mistaken, some maybe sequoia redwoods in this rainforest, a few of them, and there's some really large tree species up there.
Dang. Do you think potentially Sasquatch or Dogman would make a passage through there? Do you have a lot of reports or encounters you hear about either one of those entities in your area or up that way?
I hear more so of the Dogman, more towards the central, like Sawtooths, and those mountains, which is if you go north from me up into like Ketchum, Sun Valley area, and you hit the Sawtooth Mountains up in there, central, it's pretty much central Idaho mountains. I hear more reports out of there, but I think probably just because there's more human activity in the Sawtooths. I don't know that there's that much going on. There's some beautiful areas up in this rainforest area, but they it doesn't have the same amount of human activity in it. So there's less reports. That's my thought.
Ooh, great stuff right there. Maybe also, I was thinking as you were blowing up that knowledge database in my brain, There are a lot of cave systems in the areas you were listing as well, which maybe could be a reasoning that there's some more sightings. I'm really sold still until I can be not so sold that the caves are
Hmm.
playing some sort of aspect as to what's occurring here for sure.
So think about also the mines, the old mines, underground
Yes.
workings that we have, miles and miles, hundreds, if not thousands of miles of underground workings. If they are not flooded, they are a great system to hide in and use for animals use them. And so in my line of work, we look at underground mines to see whether or not they're posing a threat environmentally and physically, right? So, before we close a mine, we have to look at the environmental aspects. Like, is there anything coming out of there that's toxic? Because a lot of old gold mining systems, there's a lot of toxic contaminants coming out of these mining systems. And we do bat surveys to see if they're being utilized by bats because we don't want to lose bat habitat. But so if they're not flooded, and they're not posing a safety threat to human or animals, then we move on to something that's going to cause more of a threat. And so those cave systems, those mines will be open for potentially a long time until the money and the resources are there to close them. So those are great ways, and that we have caves and mines all over the United States.
Boom.
So yeah.
Great stuff right there. And I love how you tapped on both of those because William, our geologist, was also touching base on some interesting aspects that you mentioned. Again, as I'm trying to say, I believe that baboons, whether it's a healthy species or not, is something that we're still trying to look into, are kicking around in Ohio, and there's a ton of sightings of those. When you go in the caves, well, guess what? The temperature rises a ton. And like you said, the mine shafts now and things. So when people per se could be like, well, baboons, South Africa, it gets pretty cold, but they're not necessarily seeing snow and they're being seen in Ohio. All right, well, now if they're in the mine shafts or the caves, they don't really have an issue. Okay, they're going to be warm now and they can still come out and snag somebody that's creeping by with their dog or a dog that has run off or some sort of
Hmm.
easier prey, which is super interesting. But also, again, yeah, a lot of people don't realize when you get dinosaur skulls and such, you gotta be careful. It can have radiation and all kinds of things, like William was saying, because of the different mineral layers and
Hmm.
aspects. So it's really bizarre, but super cool, but terrifying because people used to use copper and such, so they were eating and drinking out of brass and copper. I don't think that's too healthy, right?
No, probably not. I mean, we still drink out of copper, right? I mean, you get copper with certain alcoholic beverages, they say
Mm-hmm.
taste better in copper mugs. So I'm just saying that's not everything we do is completely healthy. But he's right in that. So radiation, you have naturally occurring deposits of uranium. You have all of this naturally occurring radioactive material throughout the world, and I know we're going to talk about radiation in a little bit, but some of our naturally occurring or our mine systems, right, have deposits of naturally occurring radioactive material. You have uranium, um, radium, uh, which decays, I think it's radium 226, decays into radon, which is the gas that everybody's concerned about, right, in their basements of their
Mm-hmm.
homes. And so we test for that. So you have all of this naturally occurring radioactive material all over the place. And what if we have a species of, let's say, I don't know, timber wolves or something that is living in a naturally occurring radioactive source, and they've maybe interbred or uh, I don't know. Anyway, they've mutated their genes to the point where now these are like dogman size creatures. There's so many things that these animals could be around and they could have gotten into these deposits, be living amongst these deposits in cave systems or old mine sites, and now their genes have mutated, or baboons genes have mutated. And mines are, you go underground and you're at a pretty constant temperature. It's cool, but it's cool, but it's not like above ground. It's not freezing where we get 20 below.
Wow. You sure you haven't been talking to William? I'm going to text him right now. I think y'all were going over my script for tonight's episode or something.
Oh.
This is excellent. I mean, both of y'all are just, boom, firing off same things without even communicating with each other. This is brilliant.
Wow.
What else did I want to make a humorous reference on, which I said to him as well, but it actually fits into something I want to ask and explain? The Ninja Turtles, right? I mean, obviously, the toxic sewage doesn't probably create that to an extent, but radiation, I'm pretty sure, has played evolutionary advancements in certain aspects because, like you were saying, there's natural occurrences of interacting with that. There's a bunch of brilliant minds out there that think potential radiation exposure and such was also a reason why some of our ancestors decided to change the way we went about how we advanced in evolution. This leads me into something real quick because I've talked about it before with Jessica Jones and some other people, but you being an environmentalist, I think you're going to like this, and it's going to tie into the whole mutation aspects and Chernobyl. All right, natural habitats, baboons up in trees, on all fours because food sources are up in there, tropical environments or areas where baboons are naturally from, trees are meant for them to climb, which is why they evolved like that. All right, now they come to North America. Look at the pine trees and such. They're not meant to climb. They're going to be dangerous now, actually, because they can impale themselves with all these branches that are pointing out, and there's no food up there for them to eat. Okay, what's going to happen now? Just like what happened with us. Baboons, people can look this up too. There's videos where they have been around their keepers for so long, and other people where they stand up and walk just like them. They've decided to walk like that, okay? And a baboon is a creature that could walk like that and has the footprints that look like Dogman, the handprints, etc. And they themselves look like it. All right, no more food in the trees. I mean, they still are going to use the trees potentially, like cougars and Sasquatch, the first, big kind of branches where people aren't looking out to ambush. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying they're not going to be jumping all around the trees and getting fruit and making nests and such because there's no purpose for that and it's dangerous. All right. Well, habitat's different now. You got wolves and other things to be dealing with. What are you going to have to do? You're going to have to start standing up more. All right. The wolves in general will stand up to look over foliage down on prey or also look over tall grass, and you'll just see their head and shoulders. And it's like, oh, my Christmas trees. That's huge. Well, again, baboons are going to actually be meant for this. They're going to start standing up now. Their food sources are going to be things like rodents, people's dogs, easy livestock, deer, anything that they can get their hands on like they would be eating in their natural habitat. But again, now they're not using the trees, so they're going to be upright. Okay, and if there isn't a healthy breeding population of them, they could be having patchy fur, which like a lot of people say that these things have, where it looks almost mangy, that they have a huge, terrible attitude because they're not maybe potentially breeding properly. So you have aspects that aren't supposed to be occurring because there's not a healthy reproduction aspect in their populations because they're too sparse again now. And maybe they've gotten into something like you had just said, radioactiveness. Super interesting stuff.
Yeah, I find that the idea of animal mutations really interesting, especially when it's from a naturally occurring source of radiation. We have out here in our phosphate mining district, there's uranium out here, but it's real low levels and nothing that we would suggest that we're having any kind of animal mutation here. But that's not to say we have some really large deposits across the United States of radioactive material that are causing that probably, I don't know, I would say that are probably causing some mutations of genes. And then when you get over to somewhere like Chernobyl, where they're seeing incredible stuff over there happening, it's really interesting to think about how are these animals, how can these animals have mutated, and what does that mean for their interaction with humans? Because now they're different. They're different than unknown species once they start mutating.
Yes, that is so dang creepy. Colleen, as I'm listening to your brilliant educational aspects right here, another gentleman from Wisconsin named Lee Hampel, who again was on Expedition Unknown with Josh Gates, who's a math teacher who had a strange encounter, just reached out to me to come speak as well. Pretty exciting stuff. So not only am I
Wow.
sitting here learning from you and having my file cabinet is filling up, this is another great guest to come on as well to add to this strange, bizarre aspects that is occurring. When you're talking about the mutations, that is just, again, something William and I talked about because it's going to lead us into one of the biggest oopses, which I guess is I don't know. I mean, everyone oopses, but holy Christmas trees, this is one heck of an oops that did occur. There are areas where these bull sharks are breeding in toxic waste. Seemingly, especially in Chernobyl, it's these cancer resistant animals, more or less, that have survived, meaning in the wolf population over there, they have found cancer resistant genes. Okay, wow. But with the bull sharks, I guess we don't really know the outcome of that. I'm not a scientist. You are, and so are the rest of my science team members. There is no way in heck radiation and all of this such isn't going to get passed on through reproduction. Again, before you answer that, well, if you have cancer resistant wolves, then okay, you're just going to be passing on a cancer resistant gene. But if you take bull sharks that are first going into this area of toxic sludge and having their offspring, doesn't it take that first generation to survive to even become cancer resistant?
Well, yeah, and I think I was looking at some of the data from the wolves. Yeah, you would have to have the first generation survive, but they may not. So it depends on your exposure level, right? So these dogs, we know for first maybe 10 to I guess 20 years around like Chernobyl, nothing survived. Birds, insects, it was nuked completely, right? There was nothing there. So then you have these wolves that probably kept testing the boundaries, and they probably had mutations and that didn't survive, litters that didn't survive. They kept going into the irradiation zone, with the excursion zone, right? And getting too much radiation and then having litters that wouldn't survive. But eventually you're going to have survivors, maybe with low level, I don't know, if you look at the animals that were being born around Chernobyl, they'd have 8 legs, or it was really terrible what was happening to the animal populations out there. But then eventually, if they survive and they reproduce and they're not sterile, then those mutations are less and less and less. But it's like at the genome level, things get changed. Like now they're genetically different than they were a few generations ago. They're no longer the same wolf species. And that's what I think is happening.
Yeah, super creepy right there. I don't even really know how to process that. Next thing I'm going to present to you is going to make the processing even more confusing. But before that, Jeremy Wade, you must have heard of him, right? He's a biologist. River Monsters is one of
River
the
monsters, right? Mm-hmm.
yes, love this dude. Well, he went
Mm-hmm.
in there recently, did everything, the precautionary aspects, but
Mm-hmm.
point where the radiation thing's beeping and he's not really feeling the most comfortable, but he caught a Wells catfish in
Mm-hmm.
one of the drainage systems that would have went into the nuclear reactors. It was a jet black looking creepy version, but he said it was definitely undersized for its age. Had so much radiation in it, he had no clue how it even was able to survive. But I do know recently as well, again, this is something that I believe Russia would have to deal with because that part of the Ukraine is in Russia control. I believe they send in military groups to go in and smoke any of these animals they see. I understand both sides, I guess, because even though it might look like it's like you had just said, developed cancer resistant aspects, you had also mentioned how previously they were having all these deformalities and it could still be in their system. If that wolf then gets back to Siberia, mates with another wolf, you could really have a big issue, right?
Potentially, I don't. Potentially, it's really interesting to me because we're now what probably 30 litters from Chernobyl. I mean, 30 generations of wolves. I would think at this point, based on lifespan of these dogs, that you have. I don't know. It would be really interesting to know. And here's what gets me. They're surviving at a rate of radiation that's over 6 times the what we would consider the personal exposure limit, a PEL, for a
Hmm.
human. On a daily basis, these dogs are surviving this. And it's
Crazy.
not just wolves, it's packs of dogs. There's
Hmm.
packs of roaming dogs inside the excursion zone that are surviving too. But I don't know that they've studied the genetics of the dogs as much as they have studied the wolves. I do know from what I've read on the dogs, and I read this a few months ago, that these dogs have glowing eyes. Creepy,
Super
right?
creepy. And you being the scientist, here's two things. I can't even say this word correct. There is a special membrane behind the eye of any animal, but specifically nocturnal animals, that makes
Mm.
their eyes glow. And on some animals, it can give you like an orange yellow kind of shine. I learned that from Josh Gates and his science team when they were doing a lot with the Beast of Bray Road. Super cool. But then back to the whole Chernobyl aspect, William was also telling me there is supposed to be some sort of covering that was only going to last like 30 years that is past its 30-year limit, and it was only designed to hold in radiation for around 30 years. Technically, now we don't even really know what the radiation level is because, as William had stated, that time period has passed, and it was supposed to be something that basically NATO more or less would have came together to figure out how to take care of it, but no one has acknowledged it.
I don't know about the 30 years. That's interesting. I had not heard that. Um, so explain what you just, can you explain that again to me?
Yeah, I wish William was here, but there is some sort of covering that was designed to cover the reactors. And
Oh,
keep in mind that this is designed for something that wasn't supposed to have been blown up, right?
right,
And
right, right.
you would have been able to go in and do the maintenance and keep it active, but each covering more or less was only designed for like a 30-year time period before it needed to have maintenance and be replaced. There's been no sort of replacement or any ways to try to restore basically this dome that's covering this next
Right.
generator more or less. Once that collapses, a whole new level of radiation is going to be unleashed more or less, is like what William was explaining.
Yeah, more than likely, because this we're talking about 1,000 year or more exclusion zone. That's the radiation is going to be too high for humans to be in there for any length of time for at least 1,000 years because of the long half-lives of what they're dealing with over there. And so they did put a dome, if you will, a some kind of dome over the actual hot zone. But like you said, it's the radiation is so intense that I don't think they've ever built anything that can withstand the amount of radiation coming out of this
Gee,
area.
wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it was I remember when this happened, and it was just terrifying. It was terrifying on so many levels because you didn't know, like, where was the fallout going, and I mean, just for everybody around the world was just terrified about the whole thing. It's been yeah, and just tragic on so many levels, from the animals all the way up to all of the people involved. It was just terrible. So let's say I don't know, not knowing the genetics, the way that the researchers that are looking at these wolves right now, let's say that these dogs do migrate out, these wolves migrate out and they interbreed with other wolves. So are they going to be like super apex predators? I don't know. It's like, what, when you look at the videos that they present on these dogs right now, these not the dogs and the wolves inside the exclusion zone, they they look completely normal. They look normal. It's wild to me that they have adapted to this point so well in 30 generations. So you figure, what is that? What does this happen, like 40 years ago? And so that's about 30 generations of dogs, and they have completely adapted to, they're hunting in there and other animals too. It's not just the wolves and the dogs. There are now other animals and there's prey species coming back. So if they are sending military in there to eradicate things, they're not eradicating everything, because there's a lot of animals coming back.
Which is scary too. I mean, it's all interesting but effed up all on one pot, because it's intriguing to unfortunately see the adaptations, which they didn't really have a choice in the matter. It just happened more or less. But then it's messed up to see everything that has occurred and realizing, oh crap, we pretty much did a pretty big oops right there. You can see the time capsule. I would never do it, but some people will go in supposedly with the proper equipment. They go in and record it for their YouTube, meaning like they went down to the elephant's foot inside of where supposedly there was the huge active meltdown. It's just creepy. Books are still open, kids' toys everywhere. And there's a movie, I believe. I don't know what movie it is because I saw it in a music video, but I know it was from a movie where they do a depiction of that. Now talking too about the adaptation aspects, here's a great example too that I learned recently. People think in areas when they are trying to eradicate coyotes that they're doing themselves a favor, and they're also preserving their wildlife and their farm life and their pets, etc. But in actuality, what they've done now is when a coyote pack gets too low, the females put out a certain pheromone and also act a certain way, which then alerts the rest of the pack, like, oh crap, we're pretty low in numbers. And these coyotes have now started to breed with domesticated dogs, and same thing. Coyotes, the original part, would have feared people because they've been hunted in so many areas, but now that they're living in suburban areas, mating with domesticated dogs, those next generation of coyotes are more or less, like you said, hybrids, and they're not going to fear people.
Well, and we've seen that. I have a friend who has a large cattle ranch on the eastern Oregon border, and this is like a multi-generation cattle ranch over there, and they've seen, they understood that wolves would take so many of their calves every year, and they built those losses into their profit loss system, right? And their projections every year. And that was just the way it was. You're ranching out there and there's wolves out there. But those wolves have inbred with dogs. Dogs don't hunt like wolves. If you've seen what a dog pack will do. And now the wolves out there, because they've interbred with dogs, they've gone from a loss typically of 5 calves to 30 and 40 calves a year. And you cannot maintain a loss like that. And so it changes their complete behavior. They look wolf. They're a little smaller than the wolves that we have out there, but they act like packing dogs. So it's not a great thing when animals are interbreeding like that.
No, not at all. You being a farmer yourself, I'm a huge animal lover, but I've never also been put in the situation of, as you just explained, having livelihoods being affected and such. I think coyotes and wolves are super cool, and I mean, they're supposed to be part of the environment for a reason, correct?
Right.
And do you agree with the basically more or less witch hunt that's put on them, or?
Mm, boy, that's a hard one for me to answer. I can tell you that if a wolf or dog comes on my property and they're going after my livestock, I end them. That's just the way it is. I have to protect my livestock. But they have their place in the natural environment. And uh, I am not of the mindset that we live in their environment because I don't think we came from cities. It's like all of our environments, and we have to learn how to live together, but we
Mhm.
also need to eat. And we need to raise cattle because we need to feed how many 365 million people here in the United States. And there's a small percentage of those people who don't eat meat, but the rest of us do. So it's kind of like it's like we have to balance all of this. I don't want to see things eradicated, but I don't want to see we have to have cattle ranchers to feed the masses. They're breeding the cattle that everybody's eating. So it's like, I don't know what the happy medium is. I don't, I'm not sure anybody has a handle on that. We do have areas where the wolves are protected, and we do have beautiful sections of Idaho that are really pristine, and they're kept that way for a reason. And the wolves are very populous in those areas. And it was kind of interesting because my former boss, who's now retired, who has hiked in all over the world, he's been to almost every country. He's really led an amazing life. He said the only time he was ever afraid in his life was in Idaho because the wolves came in and would not leave him alone that night. And
Hmm.
it's because he had a puppy with him in his tent, and they wanted the puppy. And
Dang.
he had a, yeah. So he said it was actually frightening. It was him and his adult daughter and their puppy. And he had to stay up all night long and keep the fire going to keep the wolves from coming into the tent.
Wow.
Fascinating.
Yeah, all that is. I had just asked because I know that you work hand in hand with, ranching and such.
Mhm.
And I, as a journalist, can process both sides. But this
Mhm.
also leads me into you being a scientist. This next question I would like to ask real quick. Do
Mhm.
you think that we've kind of created this issue? Meaning, for some reason, it seems as humans like to put a limit on things, right? But nature doesn't have a limit. If there's too much of something or not enough, nature takes care of itself. Well, a lot of times I feel like, oh, people will say there's too many coyotes in this area, there's too many wolves. But if there are too many deer and things, isn't nature going to take care of that? Like, I don't know. That's where I get confused sometimes too, I guess.
I think nature has a way of balancing things. I think a lot of times when humans, we try to overmanage the ecosystem and we get things out of whack pretty quickly.
Yes.
Um, Yellowstone is an example of that. One of my classes when I was in college, I had to take a class. It was on environmental ethics, right? It was part of the science degree, and so I took the class, and it was really interesting because there was a book written on by the gentleman who developed the policy for the Forest Service to let fires burn in a natural environment because fires are natural
Hmm.
and they're restorative, right? And so, but he wrote a really interesting book on the mismanagement of Yellowstone because there was we got it out of whack. We were trying to really micromanage an area where animals really didn't live all year. We created a park and a boundary, but the animals didn't know that. And so we got things really out of whack. And now, thankfully, it's coming full circle to where they're letting animals kind of take care of themselves in there. If the and but to the point that I was standing in front of um, one of the lodges in Yellowstone, and a grizzly came running up in front of us and took an elk calf in front of everybody on the lawn of the lodge. And everybody's screaming and crying, and oh my God! And the mother elk is trying to defend the calf, which is the bear was dragging it away at this point, and they wanted the ranger who was trying to keep people away from a grizzly bear to back off and say, this is nature, folks. This is what happens in the park. So
Yes.
now they're letting nature play its course. Before, they would have probably shot the bear, but now this is natural. This is, though it was mammoth, it was the Mammoth Lodge, but this is the way, so I hopefully we're finding that balance. But I have friends on both sides of the wolf equation here. I have friends that would hunt every wolf given the opportunity, and I have friends who don't believe we should hunt any of them. And I live in the middle of it.
Yep.
I don't
Understand.
want to hunt them, but if I hear them where I live occasionally, and I know they're here, and so far they have not tried to get in with my livestock. I have other issues with other dogs, but not wolves here, and I defend my livestock. So, yeah.
Excellent, right there. And you used the word I was going to use about the mismanagement. That's just why I'd asked, because I feel as if we didn't, potentially hunt maybe so much of the prey species in certain areas, etc., then maybe, again, who knows, like you said, because finding the happy medium is super hard, that if there was enough prey items, maybe they would keep their distance from us. But now, meaning that they are running out of prey sources, they have to come closer to people because they're smart too. And then they realize, all right, people throw out all this Chinese food all the time, or this half spoiled supposed chicken. And then you have coyotes and foxes. Like when I was in Boston, there's red foxes everywhere. Unfortunately, there's more red foxes in suburban areas now than there are out in their natural habitats. But again, when they realize those things, and it's kind of like with the ocean, with the orcas attacking great white sharks now and just taking the livers out because the other food sources that they would have consistently been preying on are dwindling. It all kind of causes a backfire, like you said, and it is just so interesting because of the whole micromanagement. As we start to tie this up, because you are a super busy person, it really makes me think when you were saying the over evisceration of things and not consuming them, because we get that all the time where people are like, oh, look, nothing else came over here and took this has to have been encrypted. Well, no, it doesn't, because you just hit right on it. If these wolves and things are just doing that for more or less just the sport, which is also something that they've seen in great white sharks, specifically out in California, where they're just taking the heads off of seals. Are they doing it to perfect the aspect of unaliving? Are they doing it just because they have sickos like we have sickos? I don't know, and I don't think marine biologists know that aspect either. But same thing like you just said, I don't think it has to be a cryptid if you find something ripped all apart and nothing else consumed it. Why? Because it's going to smell like the first off wolves or such that have done that, and any sort of animal with any sort of intellect's gonna be like, oh, Christmas trees, and smell that and probably stay away from it. Every time someone's like, oh, nothing else came over, I don't know, I'm not really buying that. I'm not buying that now, especially like when you're saying that this newer kind of hybrids are just thrashing things like that. That's coming into play. Super.
Yep, it sure is. And I just know, I know because I know this rancher and her family, and it's a problem. And I'm not sure that the prey though are leaving. I don't think that we've overhunted them.
Hmm.
So because I hunt, and most people that I know that hunt, uh, they hunt to fill their freezer, because that's just what we do out here. But
Mhm.
we have a lot of prey species here. I think the problem is we have easy targets now. We've moved. We build because that's what humans do. We have families and we build, right? So we have a house maybe where there wasn't a house. So now we have a deli set up for the predators, kitty cats and pets and goats and all of these things. And they're easy pickings. It's a whole lot easier to jump a fence and grab a cat than it is to take down a deer that's running 45 miles an hour.
Love how you just made that aspect too, because I always say that it's like going to the grocery store. I mean, you and I are technically supposed to be hunter gatherers, but wait, do you want to go hunt and gather all day, or you just want to go down to Hannaford and go to
Right.
meat department and get your stuff? No, 100%.
Exactly. So it's easy for them. What we've done is set up an easy food source. And it's what we would call a population sink. If a coyote comes and grabs my cat, I go get another cat because I like cats.
Hmm.
So it's a population sink. So one is gone, I bring in another one. One is gone, I bring in another one. And it's like, we're stupid. We're the stupid ones because we keep getting more cats. It's just the
Stocking the
way it
shelves.
is. Exactly. So while I protect my livestock, I'm completely and utterly aware that I also live in wolf country. And they're there. And I grew up in bear country and cougar country. They're there and they would occasionally take something. But you just kind of have to balance your lifestyle with your habitat.
Beautiful right there. Path of least resistance. I mean, animals are going to preserve energy, especially if it's able to be so simply done. Well, is there anything else you would like to touch base on tonight, my friend?
Now, super discussion as always. I just love talking with you. It's always a great time.
Appreciate you. Such kind words. You are one of my best friends, and we always do have great conversations because you're a brilliant mind, and I love to learn, and nerding out is excellent. Super important. I do try to send anything your way that I find pretty baffling and that might have any sort of credence. But yes, to the audience, we do need to allow Colleen to get back to things she needs to attend to. But the links in the description will hold. Yes, your capability of seeing what she's going to be up to with her new podcast, as well as the one she still does have cranking out. Make sure to go over, like, subscribe, share it all around. And if you'd like to see some more of Colleen and myself, we do have a playlist, and also she's under the science team. But until next time, stay safe out there and be good people. Colleen, thanks for hanging out tonight, my friend.
Thank you, my friend.
My creatures of the night, thank you once again for tuning in. And if you made it this far, you truly are legends. Please like, comment, subscribe, feed, share, eat, yes, with the algorithm.